It's 2:47 a.m. in a quiet German town. The streets are silent, the kind of silence only found late at night. Then, out of nowhere, a deafening explosion shatters the calm. Alarms echo through the streets as two masked men emerge from the debris, hauling cash boxes into a stolen car. Within seconds, they're gone, leaving behind the wreckage of an ATM and a scene of chaos. This wasn't the first robbery of its kind. It was part of a growing wave of attacks sweeping across Europe. The men executed their plan with precision, knowing that even the smallest mistake could turn the operation into a disaster.
A manhunt is underway for a bomber targeting bank cash machines. Police tonight are on alert.
Someone used some kind of explosive device to blow up an ATM.
But the big questions are, what type of person would blow up an ATM and how far could they take these crimes?
This is the story of Europe's ATM bombers, a network of criminals who turned ATMs into ticking time bombs of profit and destruction. It's February 1st, 2023, in Kirchberg, Germany, a town so quiet at night that even the hum of passing cars feels out of place. But tonight, that silence is shattered. A black Audi screeches to a halt outside a local bank. Two men, faces concealed by dark masks, step out. They move quickly, confidently, as if this isn't their first time. Their target? An ATM just inside the bank's glass doors. Within moments, they begin their work, attaching something to the machine. Then, boom. The first explosion rattles the street, sending a plume of smoke into the cold night air. But as the dust settles, the ATM remains stubbornly intact. They weren't expecting that. Undeterred, they rush to prepare a second blast. This time, the explosion works as intended, ripping the ATM apart and exposing its contents. But the delay has cost them. A neighbor, startled awake by the chaos, has already called the police. And now, in the distance, the faint wail of sirens grows louder. The men scramble to gather what they can, boxes stuffed with cash. They toss the loot into the Audi and take off, tires screeching as they disappear into the night. But their getaway isn't clean. Police cars converge on the area, and soon a high-speed pursuit is underway. The chase careens through the narrow streets and onto open highways. At one point, the suspects use laser pointers to blind the officers in pursuit, a crude yet effective tactic. It forces one patrol car off the road. For a moment, they think they've lost their pursuers. But their luck runs out. A police helicopter, equipped with heat-detecting cameras, tracks their every move from above. The chase ends when the suspects make a wrong turn, finding themselves cornered in a dead-end street. They ditch the car and flee on foot into a nearby forest, hoping to lose their trackers among the dense trees. What they don't realize is that their every move is being monitored from the sky. Within minutes, officers flood the area, using pepper spray and sheer numbers. The police apprehend all three suspects. They turn out to be from Amsterdam, a city infamous for its links to organized crime. This was no random heist. It was part of something much larger, a wave of ATM bombings sweeping across Germany. And these three men were just a small piece of a much more dangerous puzzle. The Kirchberg incident wasn't an isolated event. It was part of a troubling trend sweeping across Germany. In 2022 alone, over 450 ATMs were blown open by criminals, making it the most prolific year for these attacks in the country's history. And the numbers weren't just statistics. They represented a growing sense of unease as explosions rocked small towns and cities alike. Germany's reliance on cash made it an attractive target. Most ATMs held anywhere from 20,000 to 60,000 euros at a time, often protected by nothing more than basic security cameras and thin glass doors. For experienced criminals, this made them an irresistible opportunity. The technique was surprisingly straightforward. First, The attackers identified ATMs in isolated areas with minimal surveillance. Once the target was selected, the operation unfolded with alarming precision. Using silicone and industrial-grade hoses, they sealed the machine's vents before filling it with a volatile gas mixture. A small spark from a fuse was enough to ignite the gas, triggering an explosion that would rip the ATM apart. This method was effective but risky. A single miscalculation could result in injury or even death. And as the German police began to adapt, so did the criminals. High-potency explosives like Semtex and BKKS became the new standard. These materials didn't just destroy the ATM, they often leveled entire sections of buildings, leaving behind craters of destruction. One such case occurred in the small town of Ganderkesee. In the dead of night, a resident was jolted awake by a deafening blast. Rushing to his window, he saw flames engulfing a nearby ATM, smoke billowing into the sky. Moments later, two masked men emerged from the chaos, lugging cash boxes into a waiting car. Within seconds, they were gone. Police were quick to respond, but the suspects were even faster. A high-speed chase ensued, winding through narrow streets, highways, and back roads. But the criminals proved to be expert drivers, evading capture and disappearing into the night. By the time dawn broke, they were long gone, leaving behind only the smoldering remains of the ATM. These heists were becoming alarmingly frequent. The simplicity of the technique, coupled with the high payouts, made it an attractive prospect for organized crime networks. And the deeper authorities dug, the clearer it became. These weren't isolated groups acting on a whim. They were part of a much larger, more sophisticated operation. As the German police began connecting the dots, one name kept surfacing. A city hundreds of miles away that seemed to be at the heart of this criminal enterprise: Amsterdam. As the explosions across Germany intensified, investigators began to uncover a troubling pattern. Time and again, the threads of their investigation led back to Amsterdam. Known for its vibrant culture and picturesque canals, the city had a darker side, a shadowy underworld that was quietly flourishing beneath its surface. Amsterdam was no stranger to crime. Over the years, it had become a hub for organized syndicates, with its strategic location making it a gateway for drugs, weapons, and illicit activities across Europe. But now, it appeared that these networks had added a new skill to their portfolio: ATM bombings. The German police, working closely with Europol, identified a particular neighborhood in Amsterdam where stolen cars linked to the heists were often abandoned. Surveillance footage from gas stations and highway tolls frequently captured vehicles speeding out of Germany and into the Netherlands, disappearing into Amsterdam's labyrinthine streets. One suspect was a young man in his early 20s, living in a modest apartment on the city's outskirts. By day, he worked a normal job, blending seamlessly into the fabric of society. But by night, he was a critical part of a burgeoning criminal enterprise. He wasn't alone. Investigators found a growing network of young men, many of them recent immigrants or second-generation residents, who had been drawn into this lucrative operation. The structure was both simple and brilliant. Recruits were trained in safe houses scattered across Amsterdam and nearby cities. Here, they practiced assembling and detonating homemade explosives on decommissioned ATMs. Footage recovered later would reveal how meticulous these training sessions were. Step-by-step instructions on rigging machines, timing the blasts, and extracting cash within seconds of detonation. This wasn't a chaotic free-for-all. It was an organized, well-oiled operation with clear roles and responsibilities. Some members specialized in scouting targets, identifying ATMs in vulnerable locations. Others acted as drivers, their high-speed escape skills honed to perfection. And at the top were the masterminds, orchestrating it all from the shadows. The operation wasn't limited to Germany. Reports of similar attacks began surfacing in Belgium, France, and even as far as Denmark. The criminals' ability to move across borders with ease made them especially difficult to track, but but the trail kept leading back to Amsterdam, a city that was quickly becoming the epicenter of Europe's ATM bombing epidemic. For German authorities, this was both a breakthrough and a frustration. They now had a clearer picture of the organization they were dealing with, but tracking and arresting the subjects would be a monumental challenge. These criminals weren't just elusive, they were resourceful, adaptive, and always one step ahead. And as investigators would soon learn, the connections between ATM bombings and Amsterdam's criminal underworld ran far deeper than anyone could have imagined. As ATM heists spread across Europe, the methods employed by the perpetrators evolved into a far more sophisticated and dangerous operation. What started with basic gas explosions to crack machines quickly escalated to the use of high-potency explosives, materials so volatile they could level entire buildings if misused. The destruction mirrored the stakes, rising with every calculated heist. In late 2022, the quiet neighborhood of Utrecht, Netherlands, was rocked by a massive warehouse explosion. The blast sent debris scattering for blocks, drawing emergency responders from across the city. But what investigators uncovered wasn't merely the aftermath of an industrial accident. The warehouse concealed a dark secret. It was a fully operational training facility for ATM bombers. Inside the wreckage, the scene was chilling. Scattered among the rubble were disassembled ATMs, caches of explosive materials, and encrypted electronic devices. Investigators also found professionally produced video tutorials and handwritten instructions detailing how to construct bombs and breach cash machines. This was no makeshift criminal enterprise. It was a well-organized syndicate with a calculated, industrialized approach to robbery. The tutorials weren't limited to local use. They were sold via encrypted apps like Telegram and Signal, enabling aspiring criminals across Europe to buy step-by-step guides on cracking ATMs. The demand was enormous, turning these guides into a lucrative business model. For a fee, anyone could gain access to the techniques that had already netted millions of euros. But the operation was more expansive than investigators initially realized. Further inquiries revealed a network of training centers spread across cities like Amsterdam, Utrecht, and beyond. Disguised as legitimate businesses, an artist studio in one case and a storage facility in another, these centers were singularly focused on perfecting ATM heists. Recruits underwent rigorous training on constructing explosives, handling getaway cars, and even practicing on real ATM models, many of which had been purchased legally through unsuspecting suppliers. For those unable to attend in-person training, the syndicate offered a digital alternative: comprehensive training packages sold on the dark web. This innovation allowed their techniques to spread rapidly, attracting a steady flow of recruits eager to cash in on the lucrative trade. The investigation took an even darker turn when authorities traced the source of the explosives to Eastern Europe. Military-grade materials like Semtex, commonly used in paramilitary operations, were flowing through underground networks, linking the local ATM bombers to larger international syndicates. This discovery shifted the scope of the investigation, revealing that what appeared to be a localized crime wave was, in fact, a transnational operation with global connections. Despite their precision, the criminals weren't untouchable. Surveillance footage captured license plates, and fingerprints from abandoned getaway vehicles provided leads. Many suspects were traced back to a single neighborhood in Amsterdam, exposing the centralized hub of activity for the operation. In response, authorities from Germany, the Netherlands, and Belgium collaborated to form joint task forces. Their mission? To dismantle the sprawling network before its activities escalated further. But as they delved deeper, they uncovered something far more complex than they'd anticipated. These weren't just ATM bombers. They were operatives in a vast criminal empire, one that thrived in the shadows of Europe's largest cities. As investigators unraveled the operation, one name kept surfacing: the Mocro Mafia. This North African origin criminal network, notorious for its grip on the Dutch and Belgian underworld, had already been implicated in drug trafficking and high-profile assassinations. Now it appeared they were also deeply involved in ATM bombings. What set the Mocro Mafia apart was their systemized approach. These heists weren't random acts by desperate individuals. They were part of a well-oiled machine. Young recruits were groomed, trained, and equipped for their roles. Drivers specialized in high-speed getaways, while explosive experts handled the dangerous materials. Above them, coordinators orchestrated the operations from hidden bases in Amsterdam and Utrecht. A pivotal case highlighted their involvement. In 2016, an ATM heist in Meppen, Germany went awry when the getaway car crashed, killing one suspect and seriously injuring another. Among the perpetrators was Anwar Taghi, a cousin of Ridwan Taghi, the infamous leader of the Mocro Mafia. While Anwar managed to evade immediate capture, his eventual arrest reinforced suspicions about the Mafia's role in these crimes. Ridwan Taghi, often called the Pablo Escobar of Europe, controlled a significant share of Europe's cocaine trade and was linked to a string of murders. His organization operated with the efficiency of a multinational corporation, funding its operations through diverse avenues, including ATM bombings. Investigators believe that proceeds from these heists were reinvested into the Mafia's broader empire, fueling drug shipments, bribery, and arms deals. The Mocro Mafia's fingerprints were evident in the sophistication of the crimes. The use of military-grade explosives, encrypted communication channels, and cross-border coordination pointed to a group with deep resources and expertise. Yet, they didn't shy away from brutality. Witnesses were silenced through threats and violence. One lawyer representing a key witness was assassinated in broad daylight, sending a chilling message. The Mocro Mafia would protect its interests at any cost. Despite the dangers, the task forces pressed on. Raids on warehouses and decryptions of encrypted devices slowly exposed the Mafia's operations. The arrests of key players revealed a network more extensive than anyone had imagined. Yet, even as authorities celebrated their progress, they knew this was only the beginning. The Mocro Mafia wasn't just a criminal network, it was a symptom of a deeper issue. An underground world fueled by inequality, corruption, and the relentless demand for illegal goods. The ATM bombings were just one chapter in a much larger story, and the fight against the Mocro Mafia was far from over. By late 2022, law enforcement had gathered enough evidence to act. The Mocro Mafia's ATM bombing operation was no longer just a criminal nuisance. It had become a direct threat to public safety and financial systems. Authorities knew they had to move quickly before more lives and property were at risk. Europol coordinated an unprecedented task force involving German, Dutch, and Belgian police. Surveillance operations ran day and night, tracking suspects, intercepting communications, and mapping the organization's web of operatives. The breakthrough came when a shipment of Semtex explosives was intercepted en route to Amsterdam. It confirmed law enforcement's fears. The group was preparing for larger, deadlier heists. In early 2023, authorities executed synchronized raids across multiple cities. Over 300 officers stormed warehouses, training facilities, and safe houses. In Amsterdam, the suspected nerve center of the operation, they uncovered a chilling scene: a cache of explosives, dozens of disassembled ATMs, and encrypted devices brimming with operational data. It was a criminal enterprise on an industrial scale. 19 suspects were arrested, including logistics coordinators and bomb-making specialists with ties to the Mocro Mafia. Authorities seized 2.5 million euros in cash, weapons, and materials capable of leveling buildings. Most importantly, they received encrypted files revealing the organization's sprawling network, linking the ATM bombings to drug trafficking and money laundering operations. The raids struck a major blow to the Mocro Mafia. For the first time, authorities had disrupted their operations at the source, targeting not just the perpetrators, but the infrastructure that supported them. The arrest sent shockwaves through the underworld, forcing the group to scramble and adapt. But victory came with a sobering realization. The fight was far from over. Despite the arrests, ATM bombings continued in the weeks that followed. The Mocro Mafia was too decentralized to be dismantled in one strike, and the training materials seized during the raids had already made their way onto the dark web. The techniques for turning ordinary ATMs into explosive jackpots were now accessible to a new wave of criminals. In Germany, the scars of the bombings were evident. Small towns and rural areas faced mounting insurance claims, shattered storefronts, and displaced residents. Some banks chose not to replace their ATMs, leaving communities without easy access to cash. Meanwhile, the Netherlands dealt with the fallout from the arrests. Ridwan Taghi's empire, already weakened by years of police pressure, suffered a financial blow. But it was clear the organization would pivot, likely expanding its drug trade dominance to compensate. One discovery from the encrypted devices stood out: detailed blueprints for replicating the training network across Europe. These guides outlined how to establish similar operations, complete with bomb recipes and encrypted communication methods. The operation was hailed as a success, but the challenges ahead were daunting. Could law enforcement dismantle the Mocro Mafia entirely, or would their fragmented structure ensure their survival? For now, the raids have bought time, but as technology advanced and criminal networks evolved, it was clear that this was just one chapter in a much larger and ongoing battle. Europe had won a critical battle, but it was only the first step in a much longer war.